My name is Priya Sharma, and I am speaking to you now as a witness, as a messenger who has returned from a place of eternal darkness with an urgent and desperate warning. What I'm about to share will challenge everything you may believe about the gods you worship, about the nature of the afterlife. At 45, I lived what I considered a blessed and devout life in London. I was a proud Hindu, a wife, a mother of two, and a respected member of my community. My days were a vibrant tapestry of faith, the morning pujas at my home shrine, the scent of incense and marigolds, the teaching of the Vedas to my children, and the joyful, chaotic celebration of our many festivals. My faith was everything to me, a rich and beautiful heritage that gave my life meaning and purpose. The day my life ended was the most beautiful of days. It was Diwali, the festival of lights. Our home and our street were alive with color and laughter. The air was filled with the smell of sweets and the sound of music. I was surrounded by my family, my friends, my entire community, all of us celebrating the triumph of light over darkness, of good over evil. The irony of that is not lost on me now. I remember standing on my balcony, watching the fireworks explode in the night sky, my heart full of a deep, uncomplicated joy. I felt secure in my faith, in my family, in the good karma I had spent a lifetime accumulating. I was at peace. But in the midst of the celebration, a stray firework, a random spark of chaos in the joyful night, struck the balcony above mine, causing a section of old masonry to break loose. I remember looking up, seeing the dark shape against the exploding colors. I remember a split second of confusion and then a violent, crushing impact, and then darkness. There was no gentle fatting, no peaceful transition. One moment my senses were filled with the chaotic, joyful symphony of the Diwali festival, the laughter of my children, the explosive crackle of fireworks, the scent of jasmine and gunpowder. The next, there was only a violent, crushing impact, and then an absolute and terrifying silence. The world, with all its light and color and sound, was not just gone, it had been violently ripped away. I was plunging, falling through a cold, disorienting blackness that was the perfect opposite of the warm, festive night I had just been torn from. My thoughts were a panicked, tangled mess. What is happening? Where am I? An accident. I tried to find my body, to feel my limbs, but there was nothing. I was a point of pure, terrified consciousness tumbling through a void. This was not the orderly transition my faith had described. There was no bardo, no intermediate state of clear light. There was only this, a sudden, violent, and utterly chaotic plunge into nothingness. The fall was a disorienting, nauseating experience, a feeling of being ripped from the fabric of existence itself, a soul untethered and lost in a cosmic storm. Time lost all meaning in that dark, swirling vortex. My fall felt like it could have lasted an eternity or a single second. And in that terrifying descent, a new and horrifying sensation began to arise within me. It was an overwhelming awareness of my own sinfulness. On earth, I had considered myself a good person. I was devout, charitable, a loving wife and mother. I had spent my life accumulating what I believed to be good karma. But here, in this place stripped of all self-delusion, I was being shown the raw, unedited truth of my own heart. Every moment of selfishness, every impatient word I had ever spoken to my children, every secret jealousy I had felt, every small act of pride, it all rose up not as a memory, but as a present and painful reality. I saw that my devotion, as sincere as it was also tainted with a desire to be seen as a good Hindu in my community. My acts of charity were mixed with a pride in my own generosity. I was being shown that even my best deeds were stained with the impurity of my own ego. The very concept of good karma, of balancing my own scales, was revealed as a profound arrogance. I had no righteousness of my own, I was unclean. And as this terrible self-awareness consumed me, the fall continued, a soul plummeting under the true weight of its own sin. My terrifying fall did not end in a final, merciful impact, but in a slow, sickening arrival. The feeling of tumbling was replaced by a sense of solid ground beneath my spiritual feet. The absolute darkness gave way to a dim, pervasive, reddish light, the source of which I could not see. It was a light that offered no warmth, no comfort, only a grim and eternal twilight. I was standing on a vast, desolate plain that stretched endlessly in every direction. The ground was not soil, but a black, cracked, glassy surface like cooled lava. A dry, searing heat radiated up from it, a constant and tormenting presence. The air was still, heavy, and smelled of sulfur and a deep, ancient despair. The joyful sounds of the Diwali festival were now a distant, mocking memory. The only sound here was a faint, continuous, and horrifying noise on the edge of my hearing. It was the sound of screaming. It was not the loud, defiant scream of a single person in pain, but the low, collective, and hopeless moan of millions upon millions of souls, a symphony of eternal regret. It was the background noise of this terrible place. This was not the vibrant, colorful world of rebirth I had been taught about. This was not a temporary state. I knew, with a certainty that froze my very soul, that this place was final. This was a destination. As I stood trembling on that bleak and burning shore, a single point of movement appeared on the distant horizon. A figure was approaching, walking slowly and purposefully across the black, cracked plain. As it drew nearer, my heart, a spiritual entity now capable of only the purest forms of emotion, leaped with a sudden, desperate hope. The figure was beautiful, radiant even, against the dim red glow of this terrible place. It had a form that was familiar to me, a form I had seen depicted in 1,000 statues and paintings in the temples of my youth. The skin was a beautiful, celestial blue. The eyes were large and full of what appeared to be a serene wisdom. He wore a golden crown and carried a flute in his hand. It was Krishna, the beloved deity, the avatar of Vishnu, the divine protector and guide. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over me. I had been wrong. This terrible place was just a trial, a passing illusion, a final test before being welcomed into the true paradise. My God had come for me. He had come to rescue me from this nightmare. He stopped before me, his presence a comforting island in this sea of despair. He smiled, and his voice was not a thought in my mind, but a beautiful, melodic sound that seemed to push back the distant screams. "Welcome, Priya," he said, his voice full of a deceptive warmth. "Your journey has been difficult, but your devotion has not gone unnoticed. You have arrived. Come, let me show you your reward." Tears of pure, grateful relief streamed down my face. I reached out to take his hand, ready to be led away from this place of torment and into the paradise I had earned through a lifetime of devotion. But as I drew closer, a cold, sharp feeling of profound wrongness pierced through my relief. His smile, which had seemed so warm from a distance, was now a fixed, mocking sneer. It did not reach his eyes, and his eyes, I looked into them and my soul recoiled in absolute terror. They were not the serene, wise eyes from the paintings. They were empty. They were dead things like black holes, devoid of any light, any love, any compassion. They were windows into an ancient and fathomless evil. This was not Krishna, this was not a god of light, this was a lie. A beautiful, terrible, and ancient lie. The melodic voice spoke again, but now the beautiful sound was a harsh, grating mockery. "Welcome, faithful one," it said, its words dripping with a contempt so pure it was a physical force. I tried to pull my hand back, but its grip was like iron. "I am who you believed me to be," the demon sneered, its beautiful face beginning to twist and distort, the celestial blue skin turning a sickly, dead gray. "And I am the one who has led millions, just like you, down a beautiful path of devotion that ends right here, in this desolate place." The ground began to crack beneath our feet, and the screams from the distance grew louder, closer, filled with the agony of a billion souls who had been similarly deceived. The demon's mocking laughter was the sound of shattering hope. The beautiful form of the deity it had impersonated dissolved completely, replaced by a being of pure, intelligent darkness, its empty eyes burning with a cold, ancient hatred. The ground beneath us continued to crack, the fissures widening to reveal glimpses of a raging, silent fire below. The heat intensified, and the screams, no longer distant, were now all around me. And in the growing, fiery light from below, I could see them. Other figures were approaching, not with purpose, but wandering aimlessly across the burning plain. There were millions of them, a vast and hopeless congregation of the damned. As they drew nearer, a new and more personal wave of horror washed over me. I recognized them. Their faces were masks of eternal, unblinking agony, their eyes hollowed out by a despair I was only just beginning to taste, but I knew them. I saw an old woman who had been a respected elder at my temple, a woman known for her piety and devotion. I saw a young man who had been my friend, a kind soul who had always been the first to offer help to anyone in need. I saw them, countless faces from my community, from my life, all trapped in the same deception, all having followed the same beautiful, gilded path to this same terrible destination. Their presence was a final, irrefutable confirmation of the demon's words. This was the end of our path. This was the reward for our sincere, lifelong, and utterly misguided devotion. My soul screamed, a silent, helpless shriek of terror and grief. Grief for the souls of my friends, grief for my own soul, grief for the beautiful lie we had all so sincerely believed. The demonic being still gripping my arm seemed to delight in my agony. You see, it hissed, its voice like the grinding of stone, devotion is meaningless when its object is a fantasy. You were all so busy trying to please us, the gods you made in your own image, that you never sought the one true God who made you in his. Before I could respond, the black, glassy ground beneath me dissolved into nothing. I was falling again, but this was not the disorienting, tumbling fall through a dark void. This was a controlled, purposeful descent through layers of increasing heat and horror. I fell through what felt like different levels of this terrible realm, each one revealing new torments beyond human description, each filled with the endless, weeping regret of souls who had been deceived. We finally reached what felt like the bottom, a place of ultimate final damnation. I was standing on a surface that was as transparent as glass, and beneath it, stretching into an infinite fiery eternity, was a sea of pure liquid fire. The screams were deafening here, and the heat was an agony that consumed my very essence. Your final destination, the demon said, its voice a pronouncement of eternal judgment. And as it spoke, it released my arm and gave me a final, violent shove. I stumbled forward, my spiritual form beginning to slide across the glass-like surface toward the edge where it met the sea of fire. This was it, the moment of my final and complete destruction. My soul cried out, not in prayer to the gods I now knew were false, but in a final, desperate cry for a truth I had never known. As I teetered on the edge of that fiery sea, my soul stripped of all hope, a new light appeared. It was not the dim, angry red glow of the realm I was in. It was a single, brilliant point of pure, clean, white light that pierced the oppressive darkness from above. It was different, a light that did not belong here, a light that the darkness itself seemed to be afraid of. The demon beside me recoiled, its form hissing and sputtering as the light grew in intensity. The light wasn't just bright, it was healing. As its rays touched me, the tormenting heat that had been consuming my soul was replaced by a gentle, loving warmth. The deafening screams of the damned, which had been a constant, agonizing symphony, fell silent in the presence of this new, holy light. The light expanded, pushing back the darkness, banishing the red glow, and creating a perfect, silent, and safe sanctuary in the very heart of hell. I was no longer on the edge of destruction. I was standing in the center of a rescue, a divine intervention so powerful and so unexpected that my soul could only tremble in awe. The light was not an impersonal force, it was alive, it was intelligent, and it was full of a power that the ancient, terrifying evil around me could not withstand. From the center of that brilliant, rescuing light, a figure stepped forward. My soul, which had been cowering in terror, was now stilled with an awe that was even more powerful than the fear. I did not recognize his form from any of the sacred texts or statues of my Hindu faith. He was not blue-skinned like Krishna, nor did he have 4 arms like Vishnu. And yet I knew immediately who he was. It was not a knowledge of the mind, not a conclusion I reached through deduction. It was a recognition of the soul. It was the undeniable, primal, and instantaneous knowing of a creation coming face to face with its creator. It was the feeling of a lost child, after a lifetime of searching, finally hearing the true voice of her father. It was Jesus Christ. His presence was overwhelming, an absolute reality that made the terrifying realm of hell around us feel like a thin and fatting dream. A power radiated from him that was calm and unshakable, the very authority that had spoken the universe into existence and had just silenced the screams of the damned with its mere arrival. A holiness radiated from him, a purity so absolute that it was the very substance of the white light that surrounded us, a purity that the ancient darkness could not endure. And a love radiated from him, a love that was not a general, benevolent force, but a specific, personal, and focused love that was directed entirely and completely at me, Priya, a single, lost soul on the edge of a sea of fire. In that moment, my entire complex and beautiful Hindu worldview, with its millions of gods and goddesses, its cycles of reincarnation, and its paths of devotion, collapsed into dust. I understood these were not all different paths to the same God. The beings I had worshipped were either beautiful deceptions created by the enemy, or faint, distorted echoes of this one, true, and singular reality standing before me. This was not an avatar, this was the source. This was not a prophet or a wise teacher, this was God incarnate. My child, he said, and his voice was not a sound, but a thought that filled my being, containing all the love and mercy I had falsely attributed to 1,000 other gods. The deception is over, now you see the truth. The words, now you see the truth, were not an accusation, but a simple statement of fact, and the truth I was seeing was both glorious and devastating. The God I had never known was more real and more loving than I could have ever imagined. And the gods I had spent my life worshipping were a lie, a beautiful, intricate deception that had led me, and so many I loved, to the very brink of this eternal fire. My soul broke. The weight of my 45 years of sincere, devout, and utterly misguided worship crashed down upon me. It was not the weight of individual sins, of moments of anger or selfishness. It was the weight of a single foundational error. I had been bowing in the wrong direction my entire life. Tears, which I did not know a spirit could shed, began to flow. Lord, I whispered, the word feeling both foreign and perfectly natural on my new tongue. It was the first true prayer I had ever prayed, a simple, broken acknowledgement of his rightful place. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. There, standing in a bubble of heaven's light in the heart of hell, I confessed the totality of my deception. I expected a lecture, a list of my errors, a stern correction. Instead, the creator of the universe, the conquering king who had just invaded hell to rescue me, did the most unexpected and humbling thing. He knelt beside me. He knelt, bringing his glorious presence down to my level, the level of a broken, weeping, and deceived soul, and he touched my shoulder. At his touch, the last remnants of the torment I had been feeling, the searing heat from the fiery sea, the oppressive despair of the dark realm, it all vanished completely. It was not just held at bay, it was healed. A profound and perfect peace, a peace that was not the empty stillness of nirvana, but the full, vibrant peace of a child safe in her father's arms, filled me to the very core. Yes, he said simply, his thought a wave of pure grace that washed away all my shame. But it is not too late for you, Priya. His words, it is not too late for you, were a gift of grace so immense that I could barely comprehend it. But they were not just a comfort, they were a commission. That is precisely why you must go back. His thought was gentle but firm, and it pulled me from my state of tearful relief into one of solemn purpose. I looked around us at the bubble of pure, white light holding back the infinite sea of fire and the silent, screaming darkness. The horror was still there, held at bay only by his presence. Remember that you saw hell first, Priya, he said, and I felt the terrible weight of his reasoning. I did not show you this to torment you. I showed you this so you could understand the urgency. I could have taken you straight to the gardens of paradise, but you would not have understood what you were being saved from. Now you know, now you can truly be a witness. He then explained the second, paradoxical reason for my return. Your testimony will be powerful exactly because you were so sincerely wrong. You did not live a life of rebellion and sin. You lived a life of devout, disciplined, and dedicated worship to a lie. When you speak the truth, it will be with the authority of one who has known both paths, one who can honor the sincerity of the seeker while exposing the tragic end of the wrong road. And then he made it personal, a loving but painful twist of the knife that sealed my resolve. Your body is not yet dead. And your family is praying for you right now, though they pray to gods who cannot hear them. you can return and tell them what you have seen. The thought of my husband, my children, continuing down this beautiful, deceptive path that ended here, in this place of torment, was an agony greater than the heat of the fire. I saw their faces in my mind, and I knew what I had to do. When you return, Jesus warned, you will face opposition. Your community will call you a heretic. Your friends will call you a traitor. Some may even wish you harm. Are you willing to bear this for the sake of truth? I looked at him, the one who had pulled me from the fire. I looked around at the eternity of suffering I had just been saved from, and I thought of my family. There was no choice to be made. Yes, Lord, I replied, the words of vow, spoken without a moment's hesitation. He smiled, a smile of pure, radiant love, and touched my forehead, and then I felt the pull. The transition back to my body was excruciating. It was the violent, reverse image of my death. The perfect peace of his presence was ripped away. The holy healing light was extinguished, replaced by the same cold, disorienting darkness I had first fallen through. I felt my spirit, which had been whole and weightless, being pulled and compressed, forced back into the painful, broken confines of my mortal flesh. It was a brutal, jarring journey that ended with a slam of sensation, pain. An all-consuming, fiery pain from my injuries erupted through my entire being, and sound. The holy silence was shattered by the frantic, high-pitched beeping of hospital machines. I gasped a ragged, desperate breath that felt like swallowing fire. I opened my eyes. I could see the blurry shape of my husband, Yosef, sitting by my bed, his face a mask of exhausted grief. His head was bowed, and he was chanting, his voice a low, earnest murmur. He was reciting verses from the Bhagavad Gita, praying to the gods of our ancestors for my safe return, and each familiar, sacred phrase now felt like a small knife in my heart. I was so filled with love and gratitude to see him, but that love was now mingled with a new and terrible sorrow. I knew where those sincere, desperate prayers were going. I knew they were being offered up to beautiful deceptions, to demons masquerading as deities, to the very beings who presided over the fiery realm I had just been rescued from. I tried to speak, to tell him to stop, to tell him the truth, but my body was too weak, my throat too raw. All I could do was lie there, a prisoner in my own broken body, and listen as my beloved husband earnestly prayed to a God who did not exist, while the one true God had just given me a second chance at life. The irony, the tragedy of it, was a weight far heavier than any of my physical injuries. My mission, my urgent and terrible commission, had already begun, and I was utterly powerless to even speak it. My recovery was what the doctors called a miracle. They had brought me back 3 times in the helicopter, and the trauma to my body was immense. But day by day, my strength returned, my wounds began to heal, and it became clear that I would make a full recovery with no lasting damage. To the doctors, it was a testament to modern medicine and a bit of good luck. To my family and community, it was proof of the power of their gods, an answer to their fervent prayers. Every time someone visited my hospital room and said, "The gods have been merciful to you, Priya," a fresh wave of sorrow would wash over me. If only they knew who had truly saved me. If only they knew the mercy they were celebrating was a cheap imitation of the real, universe-altering grace I had experienced. The hardest day came when I was finally strong enough to speak, to sit up, to hold a real conversation. My husband, Yosef, was by my side, his face filled with a love and relief that was beautiful to see. He took my hand. "Priya," he said, "the priests from the temple are coming this afternoon to offer a puja of thanksgiving for your life." I knew in that moment that I could not stay silent. "Yosef," I said, my voice a weak, hoarse whisper, we can't." He looked at me confused. "What do you mean, we must give thanks?" I took a deep breath, the truth I carried a heavy, burning weight in my chest. "We must give thanks," I agreed, "but we have been giving them to the wrong one." Over the next hour, I told him everything. I told him about the fall, the dark plain, the demonic impostor, the sea of fire. I told him about the faces I recognized in that place of torment. And I told him about the pure, white, rescuing light and the face of the one who had stepped out of it. I told him about Jesus. Yosef listened, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief and finally to a kind of horrified pity. He believed I was hallucinating, that the trauma had broken my mind. When I finished, he just shook his head slowly. Priya, he said gently, as one would speak to a delirious patient. The doctors said you might be confused. You have been through so much, you need to rest. He did not believe me, and in the days and weeks that followed, no one else did either. When I refused the priests, word spread through our community like a wildfire. Priya has lost her mind. Priya has turned her back on the gods. She has become a blasphemer. My friends stopped visiting. The calls stopped coming. The community that had been the bedrock of my entire life, the people I had loved and served, now saw me as a heretic, a traitor, a woman to be pitied and shunned. The opposition Jesus had warned me about was real, and it was devastating. The loneliness was a crushing weight. I had been rescued from hell only to be cast into a different kind of desolate plane, a life where I was utterly alone with a truth that no one I loved would accept. There were days I sat in the quiet of my home and simply wept, my heart breaking for the community I had lost and the family that now looked at me with worried, pitying eyes. But through it all, the memory of his face, of his loving, powerful presence was my anchor. And his promise, "I am with you always," was the one thing that kept me from sinking into despair. I began to read the Bible, a book I had never touched before, and in its pages I found the words and the framework that confirmed everything I had seen. The God I had met was real. His story was true. I held firm. I did not argue. I did not try to force my beliefs on my family. I simply lived out the new reality that had been born in me. I prayed for them, not with the loud, ritualistic prayers of my old life, but with the quiet, constant, and heartfelt conversation of a daughter speaking to her father. And slowly, my husband and my children began to see the change in me. The anxious, striving devotion of my old faith was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable peace. The fear of not accumulating enough good karma was gone, replaced by a joyful assurance of a grace I had not earned. They saw the change, and they could not deny it. One evening, months after my accident, my husband Yosef came to me. "Priya," he said, his voice quiet and searching. "I do not understand what happened to you, but I see the peace you have. I want that peace. Tell me again, tell me about this Jesus." That was the beginning. It was not an easy journey for them. But my unwavering testimony, the testimony of a horrified witness who had seen both the terrifying end of the wrong path and the loving face of the true one, eventually broke through. My family, one by one, came to know the same Savior who had pulled me from the fire, and my life was given its new purpose. I am no longer just a restaurant owner, a wife, a mother. I am a witness. I share my story not with anger, but with the urgency of a lifeguard who has seen the riptide that is pulling her loved ones out to sea. I know the path of our ancestors is beautiful. I know its traditions are rich and its community is strong. I loved that path. But I have seen where it ends. And because I love my people too much to stay silent, I must deliver the warning I was given. The gods you worship are a beautiful deception. Hell is real. But there is hope, there is a rescue. His name is Jesus, and he is the only way.